So good afternoon and welcome. So the topic for discussion today afternoon is oncology in the tradition of Ayurveda, and what I'm going to attempt to do is also give a sketch, an outline of how historically Ayurveda has understood the disease cancer, and what evidence we have about the Ayurvedic theoretical understanding of cancer, and how Ayurveda has formally formulated therapies and strategies to manage cancer. And at the end of the discussion, I'd also like to very quickly go through our own clinical experience at our hospital, the type of cancer cases that we have received, the limitations that we have faced in management of these cancers, and that would be it. So this is the whole structure of our discussion. We'll very briefly view cancer in world medical literature and then come to Ayurveda. This is basically to give also a historical positioning. I mean, how early Ayurveda had actually understood about cancer and documented. And then the classical description and classification of cancer in Ayurveda. These would be the textual part of it, the treatment of cancer, and then what are Ayurvedic physicians in India doing today, and which are the places, what kind of cancers are actually coming to Ayurvedic physicians. And then we'll look at some medical records, some interesting cases, a few cases very quickly. And then we'll have some discussion in what is the scope for management of cancer in Ayurveda based on what is there in the text and what we have already kind of experienced. And then, of course, the need for research, collaborative research, and what directions we should take. That's quite a lot of material to discuss. I hope we will be able to cover most of it, or at least the main points concerning these issues. So the earliest medical writings doesn't seem to come from Ayurveda, because Ayurveda did not have a written tradition. I mean, we were basically an oral tradition, so we cannot know when Ayurveda really started noting cancer and describing it. But the earliest medical writings are from Egypt, and the writing says about the disease tumors which were treated by cauterization or burning, and there is this statement that there is no treatment, which is very clearly mentioned. So this dates back to 1600 BC. There's a description of disease which seems to be looking like cancer, but not really described in the modern sense of the word. We also find in the corpus of Hippocrates, several centuries before the Common Era, and actually Hippocrates is credited with coining the term cancer, probably because these cancerous cells, because of their penetrating nature, resemble the crab. And after so many centuries, we have the Western modern development of the branch of oncology. I mean, this is only for an introduction. I'm not going to give a historical review. I mean, it's just to look at what was the way, cancer began to get understood world over. So we have John Hunter talking about, because some of these observations are relevant to what Ayurveda had already described. I mean, for example, John Hunter talks about the movable and fixed type of tumors, and that the movable tumors are actually more, easily. You will find such descriptions in the Sushruta Samhita, several centuries before. But I think the greatest development in modern oncology has been in understanding the cellular basis of cancer. That actually there's multiplication of cells, uncontrolled multiplications, and now, cancer oncology has become a very specialized branch of medicine. So this was just a brief overview of, seeing physical tumors to understanding the cellular basis of cancer. I mean, that I think is the evolution of oncology in the Western world. I mean, it began as observation of tumorous growths, but which ended with an understanding of what actually happened inside at the cellular level. Now let's look at Ayurvedic texts. The very earliest Ayurvedic texts we can find describes diseases which we can clearly correlate with cancer. There's specific terminology, there's a definition, and there's classification. And if you look at the earliest texts, Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita, they already describe cancer in great detail. And so these texts have been edited and revised several times over. So their latest editions come to, a few centuries after the Common Era. So we do not know really when this knowledge actually started in the tradition of Ayurveda. We can only say that the earliest textbooks are already talking about cancer. Now, I'll just give a synopsis of what we see in the classical texts. We have tumor-forming cancers and the non-tumor-forming cancers described in Ayurveda, which is very interesting. They knew that cancers need not necessarily always present as, growths or lumps. There can also be, non-tumor-forming cancers. Plus, there was this clear distinction between, benign and malignant tumors, and very specific terminologies. A benign tumor was called as Granthi, and a malignant tumor was called as Arbuda. And I'll come to a little more detail about this. So we talk about primary growths, and then, external as well as internal. This is just to show the extent of their understanding of how cancer can manifest. These swellings could be external or internal, and there could be secondary growths. There could be primary cancers developing as primary disease, but also cancer coming as an end stage of many other diseases, which means several other pathologies later, developing into cancer. But if you look at it overall, Ayurveda says that if your body should develop cancer, you have to really violate and abuse yourself. It's not something that comes as a primary disease. In fact, in Ayurveda, cancer is considered as death itself, not as a disease. So you can attempt to treat a disease, but what can you do with death? So this is again, just for historical purposes, these are various texts that you can see which describe, cancer in detail. Now we come to the description and classification of cancer. So Ayurveda talks about two types of tumors basically. One is Granthi, which says a Granthi actually means that which is knotted in appearance, which is very hard. It's like you have tied a, hard knot. So something which has a knotted appearance is called as Granthi. And what is interesting is Charaka Samhita says that these Granthis can actually be encapsulated. They will have a capsule. And when you surgically remove it, we need to take real care that the capsule, the entire thing is removed without leaving anything behind. Whereas Arbuda, which is said to be a spreading tumor, it's very interesting. The word Arbuda means Granthi is actually benign in the sense that it is not said to, kill a person. It can cause blockage, so many other symptoms. But Arbuda, the word Arbuda comes from himsayam, that which kills. And arbudo shatakotishu means Arbuda is a number which denotes multiplication into hundreds and crores. So we don't know really whether they knew about, the multiplication of cells in a cancer, but this word is very intriguing. Because it shows, something which was numerically less with this disease gets multiplied into hundreds and crores, and in this process leads to a situation which can actually kill the individual. So these are the definitions of Granthi and Arbuda.
Crores heißt Hunderttausende.
Arbudo shatakotishu, hundreds and crores. So the other descriptions are that Granthi is encapsulated. I mean, it is sakosha. Whereas Arbuda is analpamula. I mean, it is widespreading. I mean, what you see on the surface is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it can actually be much more penetrating. So they have given very elaborate differentiation of what is a benign and, cancerous, I mean, a malignant tumor. And Arbuda, they say, may grow very slowly over a long period of time. In fact, we have differentiation of, cancers that can go really very fast and the cancers that actually develop over a long period of time. And ulceration of the tumor, growth in a vital organ or major channels of the body, and immobility of the mass. I mean, this is a very early clinical understanding in Ayurveda that a fixed mass is dangerous. I mean, if it's a tumor and if it's fixed and you cannot move it, then it is a sign of Arbuda. So you can find that clinically, I mean, they were quite observant. They had a very good clinical understanding of how cancers are actually manifesting. Because I thought we must, before we talk about treatments and what Ayurveda can do, it would be a good exercise to review and see what was actually their understanding. Are we talking about a disease, which is really cancer in our text? So that's the reason why I thought we'll go a little into the texts and see how well they had really understood cancers. So to summarize again, I mean, they knew about cancer, that it can manifest in different ways, internally, externally, as tumor forming and without forming tumors, and that there were malignant and, benign tumors, and that the malignant tumors had certain key characteristics, one of which is fixedness and analpamulatum. Analpamula means its root, it's very deeply rooted. And mahavastu parik, I mean, it has a tendency to occupy more space. It spreads everywhere. And what's very fascinating is that when the surgical measures are mentioned for management of tumors, I mean, authors like Charaka and Sushruta give you a lot of caution that when you try to remove a tumor, they say you have to make sure that it is removed completely, or else there is a chance of recurrence. I mean, this is very clearly described. And two types of, recurrence. One is that tumors may grow simultaneously or later in other locations, and they are known as dvirarbuda. Like if you get a tumor in one place, there is a good chance that this tumor will also grow somewhere else. And this is called as dvirarbuda. And they also found that if you try to remove a tumor from one place, then there's a chance it will grow in the same place again. And that was called as adhyarbuda. So this again, they had a clear understanding of the clinical course of the disease. And it looks like they struggled, when they tried to manage this disease. I mean, it was not easy. I mean, and surgery was, one of the earliest options tried in Ayurveda. That's why I mentioned about Hunter, I mean, who in the 18th century first proposed that, that there are fixed and mobile tumors, and that surgery would be a good option in mobile tumors. But this was exactly what Charaka and Sushruta was talking about, several thousands of years ago. So their clinical observations were indeed very sharp. And so today, I wanted to say this also because there's a lot of enthusiasm in Ayurveda today, that people saying that Ayurveda can cure cancer and you don't need surgery. But we need to really look at what the text itself said. I mean, surgery was definitely one of the options offered by Ayurveda. So I don't know how many clinicians today can claim that, cancers are totally amenable to non-surgical treatment, when some of the earliest acharyas said that it's after surgery when you do, supportive management, that you can prevent recurrence. When the tumors grow to a certain stage, I mean, surgery was definitely considered as an option even in the Ayurvedic tradition. Now, there are also descriptions regarding the spread of cancer. So there are different stages that they have mentioned. One is rooting at the location itself. I mean, stages in the progression of cancer. So one is krita moolatvam. Krita moolatva means that the tumor initially, which is, mobile and, not fixed, gradually begins to root itself in that location. And this is one stage in the development of cancer. And then Mahavastu Parigraha, it starts encroaching into other regions. This is another stage in the development of cancer. And then Valtmiga, I mean, most of these cancers, they become like an anthill. You know, it becomes like an anthill and so many holes, openings, and, you know, at this stage, in fact, in Tamil system, Siddha system of medicine, cancer is known as Putru. And Putra means actually anthill. So this is a very strong imagery in the Ayurvedic tradition, comparing cancer as an anthill. And in this stage, it suddenly takes on a very rapid course. So in Ayurveda, we say cancers normally have a very long period of development. I mean, and it is at one stage that they suddenly become very virulent. So one of the clear messages that we get from Ayurveda is that cancer prevention is definitely possible. You know, we should, one of the major goals in cancer management should be to identify susceptibility and also, you know, the precancerous stage, which is quite prolonged because it is a kapha disease. We say that cancers take a long time to really grow and manifest. But the problem